She didn't cry when they fired her. She didn't beg. She just pressed one hand flat against her stomach, quietly, carefully, and signed the paper they slid across the desk with the other. One signature. That was all it took to erase her from his world. But what Marcus DeLuca didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that she wasn't just signing herself out of his mansion. She was signing away the only secret that could have destroyed him or saved him. And for 6 years, that secret had a name. If this story already has you gripping your seat, hit that subscribe button. Right now, turn on your notifications and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. The envelope had been sitting on Marcus DeLuca's desk for 3 days before he finally picked it up. Not because he was busy, though he was always busy. Not because he didn't care, though most people assumed he didn't. He hadn't opened it because something about the handwriting on the outside made his jaw tighten in a way he couldn't explain and refused to examine. V. Thompson, personal effects. It had been found in a supply closet during a routine sweep of the mansion's east wing. One of his men had dropped it on his desk without a word, the way they always delivered things they didn't understand, quietly without eye contact, hoping not to get pulled into whatever storm might follow. Marcus set the envelope back down. Unopened, he had more important things to deal with. 6 years earlier, on a Tuesday in November that smelled like rain and burnt coffee, Veronica Thompson had stood in front of Marcus DeLuca's desk and tried very hard not to shake. She was 22 years old. She had worked in his mansion for 14 months. She had mopped the floors of his study, polished the banisters of his grand staircase, and learned very quickly that in the DeLuca household you kept your eyes down and your mouth shut. You did not ask questions. You did not linger. You did not make yourself memorable. Veronica had been very good at all 3 rules, until the night everything fell apart. She had been cleaning the hallway outside Marcus's private office when she heard the shouting. Not unusual. Men like Marcus DeLuca shouted. They slammed doors, threw glasses, barked orders that sent grown men scrambling. But this shouting was different. This shouting had a name attached to it, and that name was hers. Find the girl, the cleaning girl. Thompson. Veronica had frozen her mop, still in her hand, water dripping onto the marble floor. She had done nothing. She knew she had done nothing. And yet the certainty in his voice, the cold, absolute authority of it, told her that innocence was not going to be her shield tonight. She had 30 seconds to decide whether to run or stay. She stayed. Because she was 22 years old and she still believed then that truth was a thing that could protect you. She was wrong. The door to Marcus's office had opened before she could even lower her mop. Raymond Marcus's head of security, a man built like a refrigerator, with the warmth of one, stepped out and looked at her with an expression that contained no malice and no mercy. Just business. Mr. DeLuca wants to see you. I haven't done anything, Veronica said. Raymond's expression didn't change. Then you have nothing to worry about. She had followed him inside. The office was large, all dark wood and leather, and the kind of quiet that cost money to maintain. Marcus was standing behind his desk, not sitting, which she had already learned meant he was not in a mood to be patient. He was 34 years old and built like a man who had fought his way to the top of everything he owned, which, as far as Veronica understood, was considerable. His gray-green eyes, she had always noticed, those eyes noted them and filed them away in the part of her brain reserved for things she was not supposed to think about, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. On the desk between them was an open safe. Empty. $40,000, Marcus said. His voice was quiet. That was worse than the shouting. Gone from my safe. You were the last person in this room before it was discovered missing. I clean this room every Tuesday, Veronica said. I've been cleaning it for 14 months. That doesn't mean You were seen. Seen cleaning. That's my job. You were seen near the safe. The safe is next to the bookshelf. I dust the bookshelf. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Not with anger exactly, with something more calculated than anger. He was weighing her, her voice, her stillness, the way she held eye contact when most people in her position would have already started looking at the floor. I want you to understand something, he said finally. I don't make accusations lightly, and I don't repeat myself. So when I tell you that the evidence points to you, they need you to think very carefully before you respond. I didn't take your money. Silence. I didn't take your money, she said again, louder this time because her heart was slamming against her ribs, and the only way she knew how to handle fear was to lean into it. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. And I think part of you already knows that, or you wouldn't be standing here talking to me. You'd have already made a phone call. Something shifted in his face, just barely. A flicker behind those gray-green eyes that she couldn't read. Then Raymond stepped forward and placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. Resignation letter, Raymond said. Sign it and you walk away tonight. Clean, no police, no questions. Veronica stared at the paper. And if I don't sign it, Raymond didn't answer. He didn't need to. She understood. Her hand was steady when she reached for the pen. She didn't know how her whole body was trembling beneath the surface, every nerve ending, firing at once, the kind of fear that doesn't show itself on the outside because it goes somewhere deeper, somewhere it can sit quietly and destroy you from the inside. She signed her name, and as she did, she pressed her other hand against her stomach. Flat, careful, just for a second. The way you press a hand against something precious when the world is trying to take it from you. She walked out of the mansion that night and did not look back. Not because she wasn't afraid, not because she wasn't furious, but because she had made a decision in that office in the 3 seconds between picking up the pen and touching it to the paper that was going to change everything. And decisions like that, the ones that alter the entire trajectory of your life, require you to keep moving forward. They do not allow you to look back. She was 8 weeks pregnant, and Marcus DeLuca was never going to know. The first few months were the hardest. Not the pregnancy itself, though, that was difficult enough, navigating morning sickness and exhaustion, and the particular cruelty of a body changing against your will when everything else in your life already felt out of control. The hardest part was the silence. Veronica had grown up in a small house on the south side with her mother and 2 younger brothers in a neighborhood where people knew each other's business before they knew their own. Secrets did not survive there. They got passed over back fences and through screen doors and into the ears of well-meaning women who could not be trusted with anything too fragile. So Veronica said nothing. To no one. Not to her mother, who asked too many questions with her eyes even when her mouth was quiet. Not to her best friend Danielle, who had a good heart and a loose tongue and loved Veronica in the specific, slightly dangerous way that people love you when they want what's best for you and are absolutely certain they know what that is. She said nothing. She got a job at a laundromat 2 bus rides from home. She saved money. She breathed. And on a Friday evening in late July, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, Amelia Rose Thompson came into the world at 7 pounds 3 ounces, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray-green eyes. Veronica had held her daughter for the first time and felt something close to the edge of terrifying, not the love which was enormous and immediate and nothing like what she had expected, but the recognition. Those eyes. She had known it was possible, of course. She had known from the beginning. But seeing it, actually seeing it, the precise shade of them, that specific combination of gray and green that she had cataloged and filed away in the part of her brain she was not supposed to use, made it real in a way that it hadn't been before. Hi, she had whispered to her daughter. Hi, baby. We're going to be okay. She had meant it. She had also known in the same breath that she was making a promise she wasn't entirely sure she could keep. But she was going to try. God help her, she was going to try. The years passed the way years do, when you are too busy surviving to notice them moving in small increments, measured not by dates on a calendar, but by the height marks on a door frame, and the sizes of shoes that got too small, too fast, and the slow incremental miracle of watching a person become herself. Amelia was not a quiet child. She was curious in the aggressive, almost combative way of children who have never been told that their questions are inconvenient. She asked about everything: why the sky was a different color at sunset, why the laundromat smelled like that, why the man at the bus stop always talked to himself, why some people had big houses and some people had small ones. Because life isn't fair, Veronica told her once when Amelia was 4 and had asked why some kids at daycare had new sneakers every month. Amelia had considered this with a seriousness that was startling in a 4-year-old. That's not a good reason, she said finally. No, Veronica agreed. It's not. So what are we going to do about it? Veronica had laughed, really laughed, the kind that catches you off guard and leaves you a little breathless. Right now, nothing. Ask me again when you're older. I'm going to be a lawyer, Amelia announced with the confidence of someone who had already considered and dismissed several other options. Or a judge, so I can make it fair. You're 4. I know how old I am, Mama. That was Amelia, 6 years old now in first grade with a reading level 3 years above her class and an attitude about homework that Veronica recognized as entirely her own. She was all sharp edges and sudden tenderness, the kind of child who would argue with you at breakfast and then climb into your lap at bedtime and fall asleep against your shoulder without explanation or apology. She was the best thing Veronica had ever done. She was also the one thing Veronica was most afraid of. Not afraid of Amelia herself. Afraid of what Amelia might someday want, because there were questions already. Small ones cautiously worded slipped into conversations the way you test ice before you walk on it. Where is my daddy? Veronica had been washing dishes when Amelia asked it the first time. She had kept her hands in the water and her back to her daughter and taken 2 full seconds to answer. He's not in our lives, sweetheart. Why not? Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that aren't good for everyone. Did he make a bad choice or did you? Veronica had turned around then. Amelia was sitting at the kitchen table, feet swinging, looking at her with those gray-green eyes, calm, direct, waiting. That's complicated, Veronica said. I know how to understand complicated things. I know you do, but some complicated things need a little more time. Amelia had nodded slowly like she was accepting an incomplete answer under protest and filing it away for future reference, which was exactly what she was doing. Veronica had turned back to the dishes and pressed her wet hands together and breathed. Not yet, please, not yet. She had thought in those early years that distance would be enough. Chicago was a big city. Marcus DeLuca ran his empire from the Gold Coast in the River North neighborhoods, where the restaurants cost more per plate than Veronica made in a week, where the buildings had doormen and the cars had drivers. The South Side where she lived was a different world entirely. Not invisible, Marcus's reach was longer than any map could show, but overlooked, beneath notice. She had been careful. She used cash when she could. She didn't talk about her past. She had told Danielle eventually you could only hide a pregnancy for so long from your best friend, but she had told her the minimum. He was someone I worked for. He doesn't know, he can't know. That's all I need you to understand. Danielle, to her credit, had understood. Had helped, had shown up with formula and diapers and bad television on the nights when Veronica's arms were too tired to hold anything else. You know this can't stay buried forever, Danielle had said once when Amelia was 18 months old and asleep in the next room. I know, Veronica said, and when it comes up, I'll handle it. How? Veronica had picked up her coffee cup and looked at the wall. I don't know yet, but I will. Danielle had looked at her for a long time. You know what your problem is? You're brave in all the wrong directions. What does that mean? It means you'll walk into a room and stand your ground against a man who scares the hell out of everyone else, but you're terrified of the conversation you actually need to have. Danielle, I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. Silence. She has his eyes, Danielle said quietly. I know. Someone's going to notice eventually. Not if I'm careful. Veronica. Danielle set down her cup. Careful has an expiration date. She was right, of course. She almost always was. But Veronica had spent 6 years perfecting careful, and she was not ready, not yet, not now, maybe not ever, to let it go. She had built a life. A real one, small and sometimes exhausting, and nothing like what she had imagined for herself at 22, but hers. A 2-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet she had fixed herself, and walls she had painted yellow because Amelia said yellow was the color of being awake. A job at a medical billing office that paid enough, a community garden 3 blocks away that grew tomatoes in the summer, a routine that held them both together when everything else felt unstable. She had done all of this alone. And somewhere across the city, in a world that operated by different rules, Marcus DeLuca was still building his empire, still expanding, still acquiring, still moving through the world like a man who had never once doubted his own authority. He had no idea. Not the faintest shadow of a suspicion. And Veronica had told herself for 6 years, she had told herself that this was the way it was supposed to be, that keeping the secret was protection. For Amelia, from a world of danger and violence and men who solved their problems the same way they always had, that the little girl sleeping in the yellow bedroom down the hall was better off not knowing. She had believed it. right up until the moment she stopped. It happened on a Wednesday. Ordinary Wednesday. Amelia had school. Veronica had work. She was eating toast and half reading a news article on her phone when she saw the name. DeLuca. She almost scrolled past it. Then she read the headline and the toast went cold in her hand, and something that had been quietly waiting in the back of her chest for 6 years shifted forward one step like a door that had never been fully closed, finally beginning to move. The article was short. Business section. A restructuring within DeLuca Holdings following the quiet departure of Giovanni DeLuca, younger brother to CEO Marcus DeLuca. Under circumstances the company described only as a mutual and amicable separation. Veronica read it twice. Then she set down her phone very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake and you don't want anyone, even yourself, to see it. Giovanni, she knew that name. She had heard it once through a half-open door, a voice arguing fast and low. It was me, not her. The girl didn't take anything, Marcus. Leave her alone. Let her go. She had never been sure then whether what she'd heard was real or whether her terrified brain had manufactured comfort where there was none. Now, 6 years later, reading 4 lines in a business article, she thought maybe she had heard correctly after all. And if Giovanni had taken the money, if Giovanni had let her take the blame, then Marcus was going to find out. If he hadn't already, and if Marcus found out that he had wronged her, he was going to start asking questions. And questions eventually led to answers. And answers looked like a little girl with gray-green eyes who told her mother she was going to be a judge when she grew up. Veronica sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Careful has an expiration date. She picked up her phone again. Her thumb hovered over Danielle's number. Then she put it back down. She had kept this secret for 6 years. She had carried it alone. She had gotten very, very good at it. But for the first time since that night in November, standing in a grand office with a pen in her hand and a secret pressed behind her palm, she felt the weight of it shifting, moving, becoming something she wasn't sure she could carry anymore. Not alone, not with those gray-green eyes, looking up at her every morning, getting older, getting sharper, getting closer to the questions she hadn't figured out how to answer yet. She breathed, she stood up, she got Amelia ready for school, and somewhere across the city in an office surrounded by men who dealt in silence and the settling of old accounts, Marcus DeLuca finally picked up the envelope that had been sitting on his desk for 3 days. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. Small, slightly faded. The kind of photo that falls out of a jacket pocket and gets forgotten in a supply closet for 6 years because the person who carried it was gone before anyone knew to look. He stared at it. His hands went very still. Then he set it flat on the desk and pressed both palms against it, the way you hold something down when the ground beneath you has started to move. Raymond, he said quietly. The door opened. Find her. Raymond had been working for Marcus DeLuca for 11 years, and in that time he had learned exactly 2 things about his employer that mattered. Marcus never asked for something he didn't already partially know. And when his voice dropped that quiet, not angry, not cold, just quiet, you moved fast and you didn't ask questions. So when Marcus said find her and pressed both palms flat against that photograph on his desk, Raymond didn't hesitate. He nodded once, turned and walked out of the office with the kind of measured urgency that looked like calm and felt like running. He didn't ask who her was. He already had a name. It had been sitting in the back of a file cabinet for 6 years, the way certain names do not forgotten exactly but set aside. Veronica Thompson. 22 years old at the time of her resignation, no criminal record, no further incidents, no forwarding address on file. Raymond had always thought that was strange. Women who left under those circumstances, accused of theft, escorted out by security given a choice between signing and suffering, they didn't just disappear. They went somewhere, they talked to someone. They filed a complaint, started a lawsuit called a lawyer with a grudge against organized money. Veronica Thompson had done none of those things. She had vanished. Quietly. Completely. Like someone who had something more important to do than fight back. Raymond had noted it at the time and filed it under not my problem. Now apparently it was. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and got to work. Veronica had taken Amelia to school that morning on autopilot, packed the lunch, signed the permission slip that had been sitting on the counter for 3 days, walked the 4 blocks to Jefferson Elementary, with Amelia's hand in hers and her mind somewhere else entirely. "Mama, you're doing the thinking face," Amelia said. I don't have a thinking face. You have like four faces, the regular face, the tired face, the don't try me face, and the thinking face. Right now, it's definitely the thinking face. Veronica looked down at her daughter. When did you get so observant? I've always been observant. You just don't notice because you're too busy thinking. Despite everything, despite the article still sitting in her phone's browser history, despite the name DeLuca still ringing somewhere in the back of her skull, Veronica laughed, short and real and a little helpless. Have a good day, she said at the school gate. She crouched down to Amelia's level. And please don't argue with Mrs. Patterson about the reading assignment again. I wasn't arguing. I was providing a counter perspective. Amelia. Fine. Veronica watched her daughter walk through the gate straight backpack, too big already talking to the girl beside her with the rapid-fire energy of someone who had too many opinions and not enough time. She watched until Amelia disappeared through the front doors. Then she straightened up, pulled out her phone, and searched the article again. Giovanni DeLuca. Mutual and amicable separation. She read between the lines the way you learn to read between the lines when you've spent years in rooms where the real conversation was never the one being spoken out loud. Giovanni was pushed out. That was what this meant. And the only thing that could have pushed Giovanni DeLuca out of his own family's empire was something bad enough that Marcus couldn't keep him in. Money. It always came back to money. She put her phone away and started walking to the bus stop. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They were very still. The stillness that comes after fear moves through you and settles somewhere deeper. She needed to think. She needed to think carefully and clearly and without panic, which meant she needed to not call Danielle yet, because Danielle's first response to any crisis was to talk through every possible outcome at full volume, and Veronica needed quiet right now. She needed the specific quiet of her own mind, working through a problem it had been circling for 6 years without ever letting herself fully approach it. If Marcus had found out about Giovanni, then the investigation was already underway. And an investigation meant going back, reviewing the timeline, re-examining the people who had been accused and cleared and let go. People like her. The bus came. She got on. She stared out the window at the city moving past her and thought about a night 6 years ago and a safe that had been emptied and a man with gray-green eyes who had looked at her across a desk like he was trying to decide something. She thought about what he had decided, and she thought about what she had decided walking out of that mansion, her hand pressed against her stomach, already beginning the long work of becoming someone who had never existed in his world at all. He's going to find me, she thought. Not he might, not he could. He was going to. That was simply what men like Marcus DeLuca did. They found things. It was the organizing principle of their entire existence. You did not build what he had built without being the kind of person who located what was missing and retrieved it, whatever the cost. The question wasn't whether he would find her. The question was what she was going to do when he did. Marcus hadn't looked at the photograph again after Raymond left. He didn't need to. It was already in him, the image fixed in the specific, terrible way that things fix themselves when you aren't prepared for them, when your defenses are down because you didn't know you needed them up. It was a small photo worn at the edges. A woman, young 20, maybe sitting on what looked like a front porch step laughing at something off camera. He didn't recognize the setting. He barely recognized her face softened by youth and by that particular ease people have before the world has had its full go at them. But he recognized the laughter. He had heard it exactly once in his own hallway through a half-closed door when she didn't know anyone was listening. A real laugh, not polite, not careful, just real, the kind that breaks out of people before they can catch it. He had stopped walking when he heard it, had stood outside that door for 3 full seconds in a way that he had never in the 11 years since fully explained to himself. Then he had kept walking, but he had not forgotten it. The photo had been found in a jacket pocket, his jacket apparently one that had been hanging in the East Wing closet since a renovation 6 years ago, had displaced half the mansion's contents, and some of it had never been properly sorted. A jacket he had worn that night, maybe. He wasn't sure. What he was sure about was that he had not put the photo in his pocket, which meant she had, which meant that at some point on the night she was fired signing that resignation with one hand and pressing the other flat against her side in a way he had noticed and not thought about until right now she had been close enough to him to slip something into his jacket pocket. Why? He sat with that question for a long time. Then Raymond knocked on the door and came back in with a tablet in his hand and an expression that said, "You're not going to like this, but you asked." "I found her," Raymond said. "Southside. She's been there since best I can tell not long after she left here. Works at a medical billing office on Halsted. Pays her rent on time. Clean record. No association with any known parties." He paused. "She has a daughter." Marcus looked up from the desk. Raymond met his gaze and held it. 6 years old, name's Amelia. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Everything rippled. Marcus said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. The kind of careful that is not calm but is trying very hard to approximate it. "How old?" "6. Started first grade this fall." 6 years. He did the math without meaning to, and the numbers went through him like a cold current. "Do we have a photo?" Raymond hesitated. "I didn't pull one. I thought, pull one?" Raymond nodded and left. Marcus stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to the room and his hands loose at his sides and breathed. He was not a man who panicked. He had built an entire life on the disciplined refusal to panic, on the principle that information was neutral until you decided what to do with it, and deciding what to do with it required stillness, not motion. Reaction was the enemy of strategy. But something was happening in his chest that didn't feel like strategy. It felt like a wall moving. Raymond came back 20 minutes later. He set the tablet on the desk face down and waited. Marcus turned from the window. He looked at Raymond's face first the way he always read rooms, people before objects, expression before words. Raymond looked steady, but his jaw was set in the way it got when he had information that was going to change things, and he knew it. Marcus turned the tablet over. The photo was from the school's public fall directory, the kind of thing that ended up linked through community boards and neighborhood apps. A class photo. 20 small faces arranged in rows grinning at the camera with the variable enthusiasm of 6-year-olds. Amelia Thompson was in the second row. Dark hair like her mother, small frame, and eyes. Gray-green, his gray-green, the exact shade not similar, not reminiscent, not like his. The specific unusual combination that had come down through his family line like a recurring signature generation after generation, unmistakable to anyone who knew to look. Marcus stared at the photo for a very long time. Raymond did not speak. Outside the office, the sounds of the house continued in footsteps, a phone ringing somewhere, the ordinary machinery of a large household going about its business, life continuing, indifferent. "She didn't take the money," Marcus said finally. "No," Raymond said. "I think we both know she didn't." "Giovanni." "Yes." Marcus set the tablet down. He pressed his fingers against the edge of the desk and breathed through his nose, slow and deliberate the way you breathe when what you want to do is put your fist through a wall and what you need to do is think. "How long have you known," he asked, not accusatory, just needing to know. "That it was Giovanni about 3 months, since the audit." "And you didn't tell me." "I told you the audit found irregularities. I said we needed to look at the timeline more carefully. You said..." "I know what I said." Marcus had said handle it. He had been in the middle of 3 other crises, and he had said handle it and trusted Raymond to do exactly that, which Raymond had done, just not fast enough. "You should have come directly to me." "I know that now." "You knew it then." Raymond's jaw tightened. "Yes." Silence. "She thought I was going to have her killed," Marcus said. The words tasted like something he hadn't known was in his mouth. That was the implication, yes. At the time. And she was 22 years old. Yes. She was pregnant. Raymond didn't answer that one. Marcus picked up the tablet again. Looked at the photo again. The little girl in the second row with the gray-green eyes and her mother's dark hair and a grin that was slightly crooked on the left side in a way that Marcus recognized from every photograph of himself between the ages of 5 and 9. He had a daughter. And she was 6 years old and her name was Amelia, and she had been 20 minutes across the city this entire time, and he had not known. He had not known because he had been wrong. Because he had taken the word of a man who turned out to be a thief and a coward over the word of a woman who had looked him in the eye and told him the truth, and he had given her a pen and shown her the door. The weight of that, the specific unbearable weight of it, settled onto him all at once. I need an address, he said. Marcus. An address Raymond. Raymond put a piece of paper on the desk. He didn't look happy about it. She's not going to want to see you. I know. And she has every right. I know. Marcus folded the paper without looking at it and put it in his jacket pocket. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Marcus looked at the photo one more time, at the little girl in the second row who didn't know he existed, who had grown up without him, who had been raised by a woman who had every reason to hate him, and had apparently instead simply gotten on with the extraordinary and difficult work of being someone's mother. The point, he said quietly, is that she's mine, and I've already missed 6 years. He picked up his jacket. I'm not missing another day. Veronica was at her desk at the medical billing office when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again. She ignored it again. The third time she picked it up. Miss Thompson? The voice was familiar in a way that stopped her cold. Deep, measured, professional. This is Raymond Carr. I used to work for... I know who you are. Her voice came out flat and steady. She was surprised by that. How did you get this number? The same way we get most numbers. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm calling because Mr. DeLuca would like to speak with you. The billing office moved around her keyboards, clicking phones ringing, her coworker Janet laughing at something 3 desks over. Normal, all completely normal. Veronica gripped her phone and stared at her computer screen and breathed. No, she said. Ms. Thompson. I said no. Whatever he wants, the answer is no. Don't call this number again. She hung up. Her hands, she noticed, were shaking now. She had known this was coming. She had known it from the moment she saw that article that morning, from the moment her brain had done the math and arrived at the inevitable conclusion. She had known, and she had gone to work anyway because the bills were not going to pause their arrival for her personal crisis, and Amelia needed dinner tonight, and everything just kept going. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs. Breathe, think, don't react. Her phone buzzed again. Same number. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text. He already knows about Amelia. He just wants to talk. Please, Veronica read it once. Then she got up from her desk, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the faucet so the running water covered any sound, and stood there with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling, and thought about 6 years of careful building, everything she had from nothing, and a little girl with gray-green eyes who had no idea her world was about to crack open. He already knows. She had prepared for the possibility. She had told herself she was prepared for the possibility. She had rehearsed the conversation in her head 100 times, calm, controlled on her terms. But there was a difference she was learning now between preparing for something and actually feeling the ground shift beneath your feet. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands, looked at herself in the mirror, 33 years old, tired in the specific way of single mothers, steadied in the specific way of women who have been making hard decisions alone for too long. She picked up her phone. She typed one word back. When? The response came in 4 seconds. Tonight. Veronica closed her eyes. She thought about Amelia asking, "Where is my daddy?" with her feet swinging from the kitchen chair, and Danielle saying careful has an expiration date, and the photograph she had slipped into his jacket pocket the night she left. Not as a message, not as a clue, just because she was 22 years old and frightened, and she had needed to leave something behind in that world, even if no one ever found it, even if it sat in a dark closet for 6 years and meant nothing. She typed back, "Not at my home, not near my daughter, you come alone." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, agreed. She put her phone in her pocket and unlocked the bathroom door and walked back to her desk. Janet looked up. "You okay? You look a little..." "I'm fine," Veronica said. She sat down. She opened her screen. Just a long morning. She spent the rest of the afternoon doing her work, entering bounds, correcting errors, answering emails with the precise, focused efficiency of a woman who had learned long ago that the most dangerous thing you could do in a crisis was stop moving. You did the ordinary things. You maintained the ordinary rhythm. You let the ordinary world hold you together while everything underneath it was rearranging. And at 3:15, she left to pick up Amelia from school. Her daughter came out of the front doors, already talking something about a book she had read in class, something about a disagreement with a boy named Tyler who had said something factually incorrect about planets and had refused to be corrected. So what did you do? Veronica asked, taking her hand. I wrote him a note with the correct information and 3 sources. Veronica stared at her. You're 6. The information was still wrong. They walked home. Amelia talked. Veronica listened. The late afternoon air was cold and sharp and clean, and the city moved around them the way it always did, indifferent, enormous, full of people carrying their own invisible weights. She held her daughter's hand a little tighter than usual. Amelia, who noticed everything, looked up at her. Thinking face, she said. Maybe, Veronica said. Is it bad thinking or okay thinking? Veronica looked down at those gray-green eyes, his eyes, always his eyes, the thing she could never fully separate, and thought about a man who had been wrong about her once and was now standing at the edge of her carefully constructed life, asking to come in. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Amelia squeezed her hand. It'll be okay, Mama. Yeah, you always figure it out. Veronica squeezed back and kept walking and did not say what she was thinking, which was, I hope you're right, baby, because this time I'm not sure figuring it out is something I get to do alone. Danielle showed up at 7 o'clock without being asked. That was the thing about a best friend who had known you for 15 years. She didn't need to be invited into a crisis. She felt them coming the way some people felt weather, and she arrived with her coat still half-buttoned and a container of leftover pasta, and the specific look on her face that meant she already knew something was wrong and was prepared to be furious about it on Veronica's behalf. Amelia asleep, she asked at the door. Just went down. Danielle came inside, set the pasta on the counter, and turned around. Talk. Veronica had spent the afternoon deciding how much to say. She had fed Amelia, bathed her, read 2 chapters of a book about a girl who discovered she could talk to horses. Amelia had strong opinions about the protagonist's decision-making and tucked her in and kissed her forehead and stood in the doorway of the yellow bedroom for just a moment longer than usual. Then she had come out and sat at the kitchen table and waited for her hands to stop shaking. They hadn't entirely. He knows, Veronica said. Danielle went very still. How? I don't know exactly. His brother Giovanni was apparently the one who took the money 6 years ago. Marcus found out. He went back through the timeline. He found me. She paused. Raymond called me at work today. He said Marcus already knows about Amelia. Danielle sat down across from her. The fury on her face had not disappeared. It had just gotten quieter, which was somehow worse. What did you say? I said I'd meet him tonight, but alone, not here. Veronica. I know. I know, Danielle. You don't know, that's my point. You don't know what he's not going to hurt me. Veronica said it flatly with a certainty she had not entirely earned, but needed to project at least out loud, at least tonight. If he wanted to hurt me, he wouldn't have sent Raymond with a polite phone call. He would have just appeared. She pressed her hands flat on the table. He wants to talk. Men like Marcus DeLuca don't just talk. Maybe, but he has a daughter he didn't know existed, and whatever else he is that changes the math. Danielle looked at her for a long moment. You're doing it again. What? Staying calm when you should be panicking. One of us has to. Veronica. Danielle reached across the table and gripped her hand. What do you want to happen? Not what you're going to manage, not what makes strategic sense. What do you actually want? The question sat there. Veronica looked at their joined hands and thought about what she wanted, which was something she had not allowed herself to examine too carefully in a very long time, because want was a luxury that single mothers living on the South Side on a medical billing salary couldn't always afford. I want Amelia to be safe, she said finally. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everything else I can work with. Danielle squeezed her hand once and let go. Okay. She stood up. Then go. And text me every 20 minutes or I'm calling the police. You don't need to. Every 20 minutes. Veronica grabbed her coat. She had chosen a diner on Michigan Avenue, neutral, public, well-lit, busy enough that no conversation could get out of hand without witnesses. She arrived 10 minutes early and sat facing the door because that was the kind of habit 6 years of careful living had built into her body. She ordered coffee she didn't intend to drink and told herself to breathe. He arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. No bodyguards, no driver walking ahead of him. Just Marcus DeLuca in a dark coat moving through the door of a Michigan Avenue diner. Like a man who had walked into every room he had ever entered with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to announce himself. He looked older, Not old, he was 40, now she calculated automatically, but older. Something in the set of his jaw, the way he carried the weight of himself, like a man who had spent the last 6 years winning and winning and somehow ending up with less than he started with. He saw her immediately. His step didn't falter, but something in his face shifted just barely, just for a second, and then he was at the table, and he was sitting across from her, and 6 years collapsed into nothing and everything all at once. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't have a lot of other options," she said. "You could have run." "I'm done running." He looked at her. Really looked the way he had looked at her that night across his desk, that weighing, measuring quality in his gray-green eyes. Except this time there was something else in it. Something that had not been there 6 years ago. Something that looked from a distance almost like shame. "I was wrong about you," he said. Veronica picked up her coffee cup and set it down again. "Yes. You were wrong about me," she said, "and you had me sign a piece of paper in front of a man who looked like he was prepared to make me disappear, and I was 22 years old, and I had worked in your house for over a year without ever once giving you reason to doubt me. And you chose to believe a theft over 14 months of nothing. So yes, you were wrong." Silence. She had not planned to say all of that, though. It had come out cleanly and without particular anger, which surprised her. She had expected the anger to be there coiled and ready. But what came out instead was something flatter, something that had been sitting in a cold room inside her for so long it had lost its heat. "Giovanni confessed," Marcus said quietly. "3 weeks ago, he took the money to cover a gambling debt. He knew you were going to be accused. He let it happen." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know that. I want you to understand that I didn't know." "I believe you." He looked up. "I believe you didn't know," she said. "That's not the same thing as it being okay." "No," he said. "It's not." The waitress came by, refilled Veronica's coffee, asked Marcus if he wanted anything. He ordered coffee. They waited in silence while she poured it and moved away. "Tell me about her," he said. Veronica looked at him across the table and measured the words carefully, the way you measure something irreversible before you commit to it. "Her name is Amelia Rose. She's 6. She reads at a 3rd-grade level, and she argues like a lawyer. And she decided 2 weeks ago that she wants to be a judge when she grows up so she can make things fair." A pause. "She has your eyes." Something moved across his face, quick and unguarded and more human than anything she had seen from him in either of their 2 conversations. His hand resting on the table pressed flat for just a second, like he was bracing. "Does she know about me?" he asked. "She knows she has a father. She knows he's not in our lives. She has asked me why. I've told her it's complicated." "What did she say?" "She said she knows how to understand complicated things." He was quiet for a long moment. "She sounds like you." "She sounds like herself," Veronica said. "She's her own person. She's been her own person since the day she was born." "I want to meet her." "I know you do." "Veronica." "I said I know." She set down the cup. "That doesn't mean I'm going to hand you a time and a place tonight and let you walk into her life like the last 6 years didn't happen. She doesn't know your name. She has never seen your face. You are an abstract concept to her, and I have worked very hard to keep the abstract from becoming something that could hurt her. I'm not going to hurt her." "You hurt me," she said quietly, "without meaning to, without even really seeing me. That's the part that's hardest to move past, not that you were cruel, but that I was invisible, that she could be invisible to you too." His jaw worked. "She's not invisible to me. She can't be invisible to me. He stopped, started again. "She's my daughter. You didn't know that 4 days ago. I know it now." "And what does that mean exactly? What does that mean in practice? Because in my world, knowing something and showing up for it are 2 very different things. In my world, you don't get credit for knowing. You get credit for being there." He looked at her steadily. "Then let me be there." Veronica sat back. She looked at him, really looked the way she had not allowed herself to look in 6 years, because looking at him meant looking at Amelia's eyes in a different face and feeling the specific grief of a decision she had made alone and lived with alone and could not undo. "You need to understand what you're asking," she said. "She's not a concept. She's not a symbol of something you missed. She's a real child with real feelings and a real life that she has built with me, in our apartment, in our neighborhood, with her friends and her teacher, and her opinions about everything. You don't get to enter that and then leave when it gets inconvenient. You don't get to be a part-time fact in her life. If you walk through that door, you walk through it all the way. Or you don't walk through it at all. Marcus held her gaze. I understand. Do you? Because your world, what you do, how you operate, that's not a world I'm going to let her grow up in. I know that. I need you to say it out loud. I am not going to bring her into that world, he said, each word deliberate. Whatever changes and things are changing, she will not be part of it. She will not be used. She will not be threatened. She will not be visible to anyone who operates the way I have operated. He paused. That is a promise. You can decide what it's worth, but it is a promise. Veronica studied him. Her coffee had gone cold. Outside, the city moved in its ordinary nighttime rhythm, indifferent to the conversation happening at a corner table in a Michigan Avenue diner that was quietly rearranging the next 10 years of at least 3 people's lives. I'm going to need time, she said. How much time? I don't know. Enough to talk to Amelia. Enough to prepare her. Enough for me to... She stopped. I need to trust you a little. And I don't trust you yet. And you don't get to rush that. I'm not rushing. You called my office 3 times today. His mouth pressed together. Fair point. A silence that was less hostile than the previous ones. Not comfortable, not yet, maybe not for a long time, but different. Like 2 people who had been standing on opposite sides of a river, finally acknowledging that the river was there. She asked me once, Veronica said quietly, whether it was your bad choice or mine, that he wasn't in our lives. Marcus went very still. She was 4. She was sitting at my kitchen table with her feet swinging, and she looked at me with those eyes. Veronica stopped, breathed. I told her it was complicated, and she accepted that because she's a good kid who trusts me, but she won't accept it forever. She's already too sharp for forever. She looked at him. When I tell her about you, and I will tell her on my terms and my time, she's going to have questions. Real ones. Hard ones. The kind that deserve honest answers. I'll answer them, Marcus said. Everyone, even the ones that make you look bad, especially those. Veronica picked up her coffee cup again just to have something to do with her hands. Raymond said you found a photo in an old jacket. Something changed in his face, softened almost imperceptibly. Yes. I didn't leave it there for you to find, she said. I need you to know that. I wasn't playing a long game or leaving a trail. I was 22 years old and terrified, and I had been in your house for over a year, and I needed to leave something behind. I don't even know why. She exhaled. It was stupid. It was the only photograph I've ever kept, he said quietly. She looked at him. In 14 years of running what I run it, he said, I have kept nothing personal. No photographs, nothing. My office looks like a conference room. My house looks like a hotel. He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. I don't know why I kept it. It was in my pocket. It was yours. I didn't throw it away. He met her eyes. I think part of me knew even then that firing you was wrong. I couldn't fix it. But I couldn't erase it either. The honesty of it landed unexpectedly. She had not prepared for him to be honest. She had prepared for negotiation, for charm, for the particular persuasiveness of a man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted. She had not prepared for someone sitting across from her at a diner table, looking like he was carrying the same weight she had been carrying, just from a different angle. She didn't soften. She wasn't ready to soften. But she noted it. I have one condition, she said, before anything else happens. Before any conversation with Amelia, before any plan or arrangement or whatever this becomes. Name it. Giovanni. Her voice came out steady and cold. I want to hear it from you, what happened to him, what the consequence was. Marcus's expression didn't change. He's out of the company, he's out of the family structure. He has been removed from every position of authority he held, and he will not be returning to any of them. Is he alive? Marcus looked at her directly. Yes. You didn't know. Because he let an innocent woman take the blame for something that could have... I know what it could have meant, Marcus said. His voice dropped. I know exactly what it could have meant. And Giovanni knows I know. Whatever he's living with now, he's living with all of it. A pause. That's all I'm going to say about my brother. Veronica held his gaze for a 3 count. Then she nodded once. She pulled on her coat. She checked her phone 4 texts from Danielle, each escalating slightly in urgency. She typed back, "I'm fine. Going home now." She stood up. Marcus stood too automatic, the kind of old-fashioned instinct that sat oddly in the context of everything else he was. "I'll call you," she said. "When I'm ready. Don't contact my office again." "Understood." She started to turn away, then stopped. "She has your crooked smile," she said without turning around. "The left side. She's had it since she was about 3 months old." She paused. "I thought you should know that." She didn't hear his response. She was already walking toward the door out into the cold November air, her hands steadier now than they had been all day, her mind running fast and clear and forward the way it always ran when she had made a decision and was moving through the consequences of it. She had not agreed to anything tonight. She had not promised anything tonight. But she had looked Marcus DeLuca in the eye across a diner table, and she had not flinched, and she had said what needed to be said, and she had left on her own terms. That was enough for tonight. Almost enough. She was 2 blocks from the diner, the city noise filling in around her when her phone rang again. Not Danielle this time. Not Raymond, a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Then something instinct or the particular sharpened awareness that comes from a day that had been full of things she hadn't expected made her pick up. "Miss Thompson." A woman's voice, clipped precise with the kind of thinly veiled urgency people use when they're trying to sound calm and aren't. "My name is Elena Marsh. I'm an attorney. I represent certain interests connected to the DeLuca family." Veronica stopped walking. "Which interests?" "I think you already know." A pause. "We need to talk. Tonight if possible. Before you make any agreements with Marcus DeLuca." Another pause, and this one had weight to it. "There are things about your daughter's situation that he hasn't told you. Things you need to know before you decide what comes next." The city moved around her. Cold air, car horns, the ordinary night. "What things?" Veronica said. "On air." The woman on the other end paused for exactly 1 beat too long. "Ms. Thompson, Amelia isn't the only one." The words landed like a physical thing. Amelia isn't the only one. Veronica stood on the sidewalk with the cold pressing in around her and heard her own heartbeat go loud and strange in her ears. She had spent the entire day preparing for difficult. She had prepared for confrontation and grief in the particular exhaustion of navigating a man she had spent 6 years trying to forget. She had not prepared for this. "What did you just say?" Her voice came out quiet, controlled, the way her voice always went when the rest of her was the opposite. "I think we should speak in person," Elena Marsh said. "There's a coffee shop on Wabash Cortlands. Are you familiar?" "I'm familiar. What did you mean by not the only one, Miss Thompson, this is not a conversation for a phone call." "Make it one," Veronica said. "Right now, because I am standing on a sidewalk in 30-degree weather, and you just said something that I need to understand before I take one more step in any direction. So talk." A pause. The kind of pause that meant the person on the other end was deciding how much to say and whether saying it was going to serve their purposes. Veronica had learned to read pauses. This one said, "She's not going to move without more, so give her just enough." Marcus DeLuca had a relationship approximately 7 years ago with a woman named Claire Hendricks. She left his life under circumstances somewhat similar to yours, abruptly, quietly with something she didn't tell him about. Another pause, shorter this time. Her son is 7 years old. His name is Daniel, and Marcus has known about him for exactly 9 days, 2 weeks before he found out about Amelia. The sidewalk felt very still under Veronica's feet. "He has 2 children, she said. "That he knows of?" "Yes." "And he sat across from me tonight and didn't say a word." Silence. "Miss Thompson," Elena said carefully, "that's precisely why I'm calling." Cortland's was 3 blocks away. Veronica walked there with her phone in her fist and her mind doing the thing it did when she was truly shaken, going very fast and very quiet at the same time, sorting, organizing, building a new structure around information that had just demolished the previous one. A son, 7 years old, 1 year older than Amelia. which meant that at the same time Marcus was beginning whatever had briefly existed between him and Veronica, the thing she had never fully named. The thing she had spent 6 years not naming, there had been someone else. Claire Hendricks. A woman she had never heard of who had also walked away, who had also kept a secret, who had also raised a child alone, while Marcus DeLuca built his empire and his walls and his conference room life without any indication that any of it was happening. That's why he kept the photograph, she thought, and the thought was sharp and ugly. Because I wasn't special. I was a pattern. She pushed into Cortland's and looked for a woman who looked like an attorney at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Lena Marsh was easy to find. Late 40s, precise posture, the kind of face that had learned to communicate exactly as much as it meant to, and not a fraction more. She was already seated, had 2 cups on the table, already had a folder in front of her that she did not immediately open. "Ms. Thompson," she said. Veronica sat down. She did not touch the coffee. "Who do you represent?" "I represent Claire Hendricks." "Not the DeLuca family." "No." Elena's voice was neutral, but the word had an edge. "Definitively not." "Then why are you coming to me? What does Claire Hendricks want from me?" "Claire doesn't want anything from you," Elena said. "What she wants is for you to have information that Marcus has chosen deliberately not to give you, so that when you make decisions about your daughter, you make them with the full picture." Veronica looked at her steadily. "And what's in it for Claire?" Elena almost smiled. "She'd like to not be isolated in this. She's been dealing with the DeLuca legal team for 9 days, and it has not been pleasant. She thought that another mother in a similar position might be useful to know." "Useful," Veronica repeated. Her word, not mine. "I think what she actually means is less alone. Something in that landed differently than the rest. Less strategic, more true." Veronica pulled the coffee toward her. "Tell me everything." Elena talked for 20 minutes. Veronica listened without interrupting, which took more discipline than anything else she had done that day. She had a talent for listening, for taking in information and holding it without reacting until she had the whole shape of it, and she used it now, sitting very still, letting it all come in. Claire Hendricks had been 25 when she met Marcus. She was a contractor, interior design, high-end residential work, and she had been hired for a renovation project at one of his properties. The relationship had been brief. 4 months. She had ended it before she knew she was pregnant, and by the time she knew, she had already decided she didn't want Marcus DeLuca in her life or her child's life. She had seen enough in those 4 months to understand what proximity to that world meant. Daniel had been born, healthy, raised well, was now 7 and in 2nd grade, and according to Elena, completely unaware of any of this. 9 days ago, Marcus's legal team had contacted Claire. Not Marcus himself, his lawyers, with paperwork demands for a DNA test and what Elena described as a strongly worded proposal for a custody arrangement that Claire's legal team had immediately and firmly declined. "The DNA test came back 4 days ago," Elena said. "Confirmed. Daniel is Marcus's son." She opened the folder and turned it toward Veronica. "What we're concerned about, what Claire is concerned about, is this." Veronica looked at the document. It took her a moment to understand what she was reading. Then she understood, and the cold that went through her had nothing to do with the temperature outside. It was a legal filing, preliminary, a petition for shared legal custody of both minor children, Daniel Hendricks, age 7, and Amelia Thompson, age 6, to be heard simultaneously in Cook County Family Court. Both children, together, in the same filing. "He's combining them," Veronica said. "His legal team is combining them, yes. The argument is that handling both custody matters together is more efficient and equitable. The real strategic advantage is that we're less powerful together than we are separate," Veronica said. "If Claire and I are both responding to the same filing, our resources are split. His aren't, and any arrangement the court makes applies to both families simultaneously, which means he controls the terms for both at once." She looked up. "That's what this is." Elena held her gaze. "That is what this is." Veronica closed the folder. She sat back. She pressed 2 fingers against the space between her eyebrows and breathed. He had sat across from her tonight. He had looked at her with what she had read as honesty, and some of it had been honest. She didn't think she had imagined that, but he had known the whole time that his legal team was already moving, that there was already a filing with Amelia's name on it, that the conversation about trust and time and let me be there was happening simultaneously with lawyers building a structure that would reduce both her and Claire's ability to respond. She thought about the exactness of his words. "I'm not rushing," he had said it while his team was already filing. "He doesn't know I'm talking to you," Elena said. It was not a question. "No, I imagine he'll find out relatively quickly." "How did you get my number?" Claire had Raymond's number from the initial contact. Raymond's communications are not as secure as Marcus assumes. A slight pause. "Your number was in a call log." Veronica absorbed this. "Does Marcus know about this meeting?" "Not yet." "Then we have a window." She leaned forward. "How long has the filing been in process?" "The preliminary petition was filed 6 days ago. There's a hearing scheduled in 3 weeks." 3 weeks. Veronica did the math. "Before I had any idea any of this was happening." "Before either of you had any idea," Elena confirmed. The thing that Veronica felt then was not rage, not exactly. It was something colder and more clarifying. The specific feeling of understanding a situation completely after having understood it partially and realizing that the partial understanding had almost been enough to make a very significant mistake. She had almost trusted him tonight. She had almost, at the end of that dinner, let herself believe that the honesty was real enough to build something on. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Danielle. "I need a lawyer. Family law, best one you know, tonight if possible." Danielle's response came in 40 seconds. "Carol Reyes, I'll send you her number." "What is happening? I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Don't panic." "I am absolutely panicking, Veronica." She put the phone down. "I want to talk to Claire," she said to Elena. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a second phone, a backup, the kind people use when they didn't want conversations traced to their primary line. She dialed and handed it across. 2 rings. "Elena," a woman's voice, steady but with the particular tension of someone who had been waiting by the phone and was trying not to let that show. "This is Veronica Thompson," Veronica said. Silence, then a breath. "Hi." "Hi." Another short silence. 2 women who had never spoken, connected by a man who had managed to be absent from both their lives in consequential ways. "He sat across from me at dinner tonight," Veronica said. "He said he wanted to be in Amelia's life. He said he understood my terms. He did not mention your son. He did not mention the filing." "No," Claire said quietly. "He wouldn't." "How are you? Veronica stopped. "I don't know what to say here. This is not a situation I've practiced for." A short, slightly broken sound came from the other end that was almost a laugh. "Me neither. I've been sitting in my kitchen for 9 days trying to figure out what to do, and mostly just drinking too much coffee and staring at legal documents I don't fully understand." "How's your son?" "He doesn't know any of this. I've kept him completely out of it." A pause. "He's a good kid. He's loud, and he breaks things, and he thinks he's hilarious." Her voice softened despite everything. "He kind of is hilarious." "Amelia writes people notes with citation sources when they're factually wrong," Veronica said. Claire made that almost laugh sound again stronger this time. "They'd probably either be best friends or mortal enemies." "Probably both," Veronica said, a silence that was less tense than the previous ones. The particular quiet of 2 strangers finding unexpected common ground in the middle of a crisis. "I don't want to fight you," Claire said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not interested in competing over any of this. I just want to protect Daniel. And when Elena told me about you, I thought maybe we're stronger as a coordinated response than as separate filings," Veronica said. "Yes, exactly." Elena said the hearing is in 3 weeks. "Yes, and their team they're very good, very fast. I didn't have a lawyer when they first contacted me, and by the time I had Carol Reyes on the phone, they had already filed 3 documents." "I'm calling Carol Reyes tonight," Veronica said. "Good." Claire exhaled. "Good, okay. I feel better about that." A pause. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When you met with him tonight, do you think he actually—" She stopped, tried again. "Do you think any of it was real, the wanting to be there, or is it all just—" She didn't finish. Veronica thought about the photograph, about the way his hands had gone flat on the desk when Raymond said 6 years old, about the crooked smile she had thrown at him on her way out the door, and the silence she hadn't waited to hear fill. "I think some of it is real," she said carefully. "I think he genuinely wants to know his children. And I think he is also completely capable of letting his legal team do things that contradict everything he says in person because he's been operating that way his entire adult life, and he doesn't fully see the contradiction. So which do we respond to, the real part or the legal part? Both, Veronica said, at the same time, without letting the real part make us careless about the legal part. Claire was quiet for a moment. You're very calm. I'm not calm. I just sound like it. I'll take the sound of it right now, Claire said. Honestly. Veronica left Cortland's at 10:15. The city was darker and quieter at this hour, the traffic thinned, the sidewalks emptied to the occasional hurrying figure. She walked 2 blocks before she stopped and stood still and let herself feel for 60 full seconds. Everything she had not let herself feel all evening. The anger was there, clean and righteous and entirely earned. He had looked her in the eye and spoken about trust while his lawyers filed documents with her daughter's name on them. He had talked about promises while building a legal structure designed to minimize her ability to respond. That was real. That had to be dealt with. But there was something else too sitting underneath the anger, less comfortable to acknowledge. When he had said, "She's mine and I've already missed 6 years," she had seen something in his face that was not strategy. It was the face of a man that experiencing something that he did not have the architecture to manage. Loss. Real loss. The specific grief of understanding what you failed to see when it was right in front of you. She did not know what to do with that. Not tonight. She started walking again. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Marcus. She answered on the second ring. You met with Elena Marsh tonight. His voice was not angry. It was careful. The careful that was not calm. Yes, she said. Veronica. You filed a custody petition 6 days ago with Amelia's name on it, while you were calling my office and asking to meet for coffee and talking about trust. Silence. You need to explain that to me, she said, right now in the next 30 seconds, because what I do next depends on what you say. The filing was not my decision, but you knew about it. A pause that was 1 beat too long. Yes. When did you know before tonight? Before you sat across from me and told me you weren't rushing. Another pause. She heard him breathe. Yes. Then everything you said about trust was true, he said. I meant everything I said. You can't mean it and then file legal documents designed to reduce my ability to protect my daughter at the same time, Marcus. You cannot hold both of those things and call yourself honest. I let my legal team do what they do, he said. I've been running things that way for 15 years. I give a directive and they execute it. I don't always, he stopped. That's not an excuse. I know that's not an excuse. Then what is it? It's the truth. It's the part of the truth I'm not proud of. His voice changed, quieter, the specific quiet of someone not performing. I want to know my daughter. That is the most honest thing I have said to anyone in years. And I am also someone who has been running on leverage and legal infrastructure for so long that I don't always know the difference between protecting myself and doing what I actually want. Veronica stopped walking again. The street was quiet around her. Withdraw the joint filing, she said. Silence. Withdraw it, she said again. Bowen's like, deal with Claire's situation separately. Deal with mine separately. On terms that we each have real time to respond to. Or I take Amelia and I make it so complicated for you legally that by the time anything gets resolved, she'll be in college. Veronica. I am not negotiating. I am telling you what happens next if you want any version of this to work. A long pause. Longer than the others. I'll call them tonight, he said. I want it withdrawn by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be checking. I said I'll call them. And Marcus. Her voice dropped. Not softer, more direct. The way you speak when you need someone to hear the exact weight of your words. I know about Claire. I know about Daniel. And if your plan involves handling any of this in a way that puts those two kids against each other or uses one of them as leverage over the other, I will make it my full-time occupation to make sure you never have an unsupervised conversation with either of them. Are we clear? The silence this time was different. Not the silence of someone calculating. The silence of someone genuinely stopped. Where did you? He didn't finish. Elena. Are we clear? She said again. Yeah, he said quietly. We're clear. Good night, Marcus. She hung up before he could respond. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the phone warm in her cold hand, the city doing its indifferent nighttime thing around her. She was exhausted. Bone deep 6 years, compounded exhausted. And she still had to go home and check on Amelia and call Carol Reyes and update Danielle and figure out how to sleep through whatever was coming next. But something had shifted. Not resolved. Nothing was resolved. Nothing was going to be resolved quickly or cleanly or without cost. But shifted. She was no longer responding to things as they happened. She was moving forward into them with her eyes open and her terms on the table. That was different. That felt, if not like safety, then like the beginning of it. She started walking toward the bus stop. Her phone buzzed one more time. Not Marcus. A number she didn't recognize again. She stopped, looked at it. Against every instinct that told her she had had enough revelations for one night, she answered, Ms. Thompson, a man's voice this time, low, slightly rough, with the particular hesitation of someone who had been rehearsing this call and had now run out of script. You don't know me. My name is Giovanni DeLuca. The name hit her like a door opening into cold air. I think you've been waiting 6 years for an apology, Giovanni said. And I've been a coward about it for 6 years. But some things don't get to wait anymore. A pause, Waituman. I need to tell you something about that night, something Marcus doesn't know, something that changes the story. His voice tightened, something that puts you and your daughter in a position you need to understand before any of this goes further. Veronica closed her eyes. One breath. Then she said, I'm listening. Giovanni DeLuca's voice on the phone had the specific texture of a man who had been rehearsing this conversation for a long time and had finally run out of reasons not to have it. Veronica stood on the sidewalk and listened. I need you to understand something first, he said. I'm not calling to make myself feel better. I know that's what apologies usually are, the person doing the apologizing, getting the weight off their chest and handing it to someone else to carry. I don't want to do that to you. A pause. But there are things in motion right now that you don't have the full picture for, and you need it. Then give it to me, Veronica said. He exhaled. The night you were fired, I was in the house. I was the one who told Marcus the money was gone. I framed the timeline to point at you. I knew you had been in the study. I knew you cleaned the safe area. It was deliberate. I know that part, Veronica said. Marcus told me. What Marcus doesn't know, Giovanni said, is why. She waited. The $40,000 was only part of what I took. Over 18 months, I moved approximately $230,000 out of accounts Marcus didn't monitor closely. Small amounts, regular intervals. I'd been doing it since before you ever worked there. His voice tightened. When the $40,000 was flagged by an internal audit I wasn't supposed to know about, I had about 6 hours to create a distraction large enough that Marcus would close the investigation before it went deeper. Veronica felt something cold and deliberate move through her chest. You used me as a distraction. Yes. Not because I was convenient, because if Marcus spent his energy on me, firing me, dealing with the accusation, he wouldn't keep pulling the thread. Yes. And it worked. For 6 years, Giovanni said quietly. Yes, it worked. She pressed her free hand against her sternum, breathed. What does any of this have to do with what's happening now? Because when Marcus found out about my embezzlement 3 months ago during the audit, the investigators didn't stop at the $40,000. They went back through everything, all of it. And part of what they found, he stopped, started again. Part of what they found was a payment, 18 months after you left, made to a private investigator. Veronica went very still. Someone paid to track you, Giovanni said, to find out where you went, what you were doing, whether you had. He didn't finish that sentence. The payment came from an account I controlled, but I didn't make it. Who did? Someone who had access to my accounts. Someone who knew about you. A pause. Someone who had more reason than I did to want to know whether you had left that house carrying something that could complicate things. Giovanni. Her voice was flat and careful. Say the name. Helena DeLuca, my mother. The name dropped into the night air and sat there. Veronica stood completely still on the sidewalk, the phone pressed hard against her ear, and felt the architecture of the last 6 years reorganize itself around a new load-bearing wall she hadn't known existed. Marcus's mother, a woman she had never met, never spoken to, never thought about in any strategic sense, because she had been so focused on Marcus, on surviving him, on hiding from him, that she had never considered who else in that household might have been watching. She had you tracked, Veronica said slowly. And then what? The investigator found you, found out you were pregnant, filed a report. Giovanni's voice was strained now, the rehearsed calm breaking down at the edges. Helena got the report. She paid the investigator to close the file and keep it quiet. Destroy copies. He stopped. She made a decision that wasn't hers to make. She decided Marcus didn't need to know. His own mother hid his child from him. She was protecting the family. That's how she sees it. That's how she's always seen it. Bitterness crept in. A cleaning woman with a baby was a complication, a scandal, something that would distract Marcus from building the empire. Helena has always been very focused on the empire. Does Marcus know any of this? Not yet. The investigators' payments came up in the audit. My investigators connected them to Helena's direction 3 days ago. I've known for 72 hours. A breath. I haven't told Marcus because I needed to tell you first. Because you deserve to know first. That much I can do right. Veronica looked up at the dark sky above the city and breathed through the tightness in her chest. 6 years, not just Marcus being wrong about her, not just Giovanni's cowardice and theft. There had been someone else, a woman she had never seen, who had known the truth about Amelia and had actively chosen to bury it. Is Helena still involved in the family's operations? She asked. She's on the board, advisory capacity. She and Marcus talk every week. He paused. She doesn't know I found out. She doesn't know I'm calling you. If Marcus finds out what she did, it will be the worst crisis in that family in 30 years, Giovanni said quietly. Marcus and my mother have a relationship that has survived everything, including what I did. This, he exhaled, I don't know if it survives this. That's not my problem to manage, Veronica said. No, it's not. A pause. I'm sorry for all of it, for what I did to you 6 years ago, for the years it cost you. I know that doesn't fix anything, she said. No. Or give them back. No. She closed her eyes briefly. I appreciate the call, Giovanni, I mean that. She opened her eyes. Now I have to go. She hung up. She stood there for exactly 10 seconds, doing nothing. Just standing, letting the full weight of it settle. Then she called Marcus. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been sitting with his phone in his hand. Veronica, I need to see you, she said. Tonight, not at a restaurant, not a public space, somewhere private. Just you, no Raymond, no lawyers, no one else. What happened? His voice sharpened. Are you okay? Is Amelia? Amelia is fine. I'm fine, so she kept her voice even. But there's something you need to know, and you need to hear it from me in person. Not from a phone call, not from an email, not from whatever your investigators are going to find when they keep pulling that thread. A silence. How bad is it? That depends on you, she said. The information itself is survivable. What you do with it is the question. Another silence. She could hear him thinking the particular quality of his silences when he was processing, recalibrating. My car, I'll text you the address. 20 minutes. Fine. She walked to the location he texted, a parking structure on Michigan 4th level, which was the kind of place you chose when you needed a private conversation and had spent your life in a world where private conversations had to be conducted away from ears and cameras. He was already there when she arrived, standing outside the car. No driver, no Raymond, just Marcus in his dark coat, looking like a man who had been braced for impact all evening and had been right to be. She told him everything. Cleanly, without embellishment or editorializing. Giovanni's called the extent of the embezzlement, the private investigator, the payment, the report, the decision to bury it. His mother's name. She watched his face as she said it. She had thought she knew what to expect. Anger, denial, the particular coldness that powerful men deployed when their world was being restructured against their will. What she saw instead was something much harder to watch. It was the face of a man absorbing a loss he hadn't known he was about to feel. Not rage, devastation, the quiet, terrible kind. He didn't speak for a long moment. She knew, he said finally. Yes. She knew for 6 years. Yes. She knew about Amelia, and she looked me in the eye every week, and he stopped. His jaw was working. She made that choice for me. Yes. Without telling me. Without my daughter existed for 6 years, and my mother knew, and she... Marcus, Veronica's voice was quiet but firm. I need you to hear me right now. What your mother did was wrong. It was a profound wrong, but I need you to also hear that I made choices too. I chose not to find a way to reach you. I told myself it was for Amelia's safety, and some of it was, but some of it was... She stopped, made herself say it. Some of it was fear and anger and not wanting to need anything from you. Those were my choices, and they cost time too. He looked at her, really looked the way he had in the diner. You're not responsible for what my mother... No, but I'm responsible for my part of it. And I'm telling you that because if we're going to do this, whatever this becomes for Amelia's sake, it has to start with honesty. From both of us. All the way down. The silence between them held something different now. Not just the weight of everything that had been done wrong. Something else underneath it. The specific fragile thing that appears when the two people who have been circling each other for years finally stop moving and stand still long enough to see each other clearly. What are you going to do, she asked, about your mother? His eyes were steady, cold in a way that was not aimed at her. What I should have done 6 years ago when she made a decision that wasn't hers to make. He straightened. I'm going to handle it. Not violently. No, his voice was flat. Not violently, but completely. She believed him. She got home at 11:30. Danielle was asleep on her couch, which was so deeply characteristically Danielle that Veronica felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of it, the specific physical relief of a person who loves you enough to fall asleep waiting for you. She covered her with the blanket from the armchair and went down the hall. Amelia's door was open 2 inches. It was always open 2 inches. She was afraid of the dark, but too proud to say so. So she had negotiated at age 4 a policy of the door stays open a little, which both of them pretended was entirely about air circulation. Veronica pushed the door open slightly and stood in the gap and looked at her daughter sleeping. She looked at the gray-green eyes closed under their dark lashes, the dark hair spread on the pillow, the slight leftward pull of her mouth even in sleep, the crooked smile, the one she had mentioned to Marcus as she walked out of the diner, the one that had gone across his face like a current. 6 years of this. 6 years of this exact moment, standing in a doorway, looking at this child, feeling the specific enormity of being the only thing between her and a world that had not yet agreed to be careful with her. I'm figuring it out, she whispered, not to Amelia, to herself, to the version of herself who had walked out of a mansion at 22 years old with her hand pressed against her stomach and a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She had kept it. She went to the kitchen, sat at the table, and called Carol Reyes, who answered on the second ring and listened for 40 minutes without interrupting, and said at the end, "We file a response to their petition by Friday. You have more ground to stand on than they expected. Get some sleep." Veronica said she would. She didn't entirely, but she tried. 3 weeks move fast when you had a lawyer who was genuinely angry on your behalf, and a best friend who drove her to every appointment, and a 6-year-old who had no idea any of this was happening and continued to argue about planets and write notes with citations and fall asleep on Veronica's shoulder during movie nights with the boneless, absolute trust of a child who had never had reason to doubt she was safe. Carol Reyes filed the response on Friday. It was in Elena Marsh's words when she called to acknowledge receipt extremely thorough. The joint custody petition was quietly withdrawn the following Tuesday, 9 days ahead of the hearing, with no announcement, no explanation, and the kind of abrupt efficiency that meant someone with authority had made a phone call. Marcus Veronica suspected, making good on his word. She noted it. She did not soften, but she noted it. Helena DeLuca resigned from the DeLuca Holdings Board 11 days after Veronica told Marcus what Giovanni had said. The company's statement cited personal reasons. There was no further public comment. Veronica did not ask for details, and Marcus did not offer them, and that silence was one of the most telling things he had communicated since they'd started talking again. He was doing what he had said he would do. Completely. Not loudly, not dramatically, just with the quiet, thorough decisiveness of a man who had finally understood what it cost to let the wrong people make decisions in his name. The meeting happened on a Saturday morning in late January. Veronica had chosen a place Amelia already loved, a small park near their apartment that had a good climbing structure and a hot dog cart that opened at 10 and a view of the lake on clear days. She had told Amelia the night before, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, in the careful, honest language she had been practicing for 3 weeks. "There's someone I want you to meet tomorrow," she said. "He's your father." Amelia had gone very still, not the theatrical stillness of a child performing surprise, the real kind, the kind that meant something important was being filed away carefully. "Is he nice?" she asked. "I think he's trying to be," Veronica said. "That's not the same as being nice." "No, it's not, but it's where nice starts." She reached across the table and took her daughter's hands. "You don't have to feel anything specific about this. You don't have to like him immediately. You don't have to feel excited or happy or anything. Whatever you feel is okay." Amelia looked at her steadily. "What do you feel?" Veronica considered lying, considered softening it, decided against both. "Scared," she said, "and a little bit of something that might be hope. It's too soon to know which one wins." Amelia had absorbed this and nodded slowly and said, "Okay, I want to wear my yellow jacket." "Okay. And I want to leave whenever I want to leave." "Absolutely. And you stay the whole time." "I will not move an inch." Amelia had nodded again with the settled authority of someone who had negotiated acceptable terms and was prepared to proceed. "Okay then." Marcus arrived at the park before them. Veronica saw him from half a block away and slowed her pace slightly, giving herself a moment to observe what she could not see from close up. He was standing by the entrance, not sitting, because sitting felt passive, she understood, and he was not a passive man with his hands in his coat pockets and his weight shifted forward slightly, the posture of someone who was trying not to look like he was bracing for the most important thing that had ever happened to him. He was failing at it. He looked in that unguarded moment before he saw them like a man who was genuinely afraid. Not of consequences, not of outcomes, just afraid the way anyone is afraid of a thing that matters too much to get wrong. She felt something she had not been expecting. Not forgiveness, that was a longer road, and she was honest enough with herself to know it. Not warmth exactly, not yet, but recognition. The recognition of a person being human in a way they could not control or manage or protect themselves from. She kept walking. He turned and saw them. His face did something complicated and immediate that he did not try to hide, and she respected him for that, for not hiding it, for not deploying the composed, controlled expression she had seen him wear for the entire duration of every previous conversation they'd had. Amelia had gone quiet at her side. Not shy, Amelia was constitutionally incapable of shy, but watchful. Taking in information the way she always did, building her assessment before she spoke. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. The gray-green eyes met the gray-green eyes. And Amelia, who had never seen this man before in her life, tilted her head slightly to the left and said, "You have my eyes." Something moved across Marcus's face that Veronica was not going to describe to anyone because it was his and it was private, and it was the kind of thing you don't take from people even when you have every reason to be hard on them. "I think," he said carefully, "that you might have mine." Amelia considered this. "That's fair. They were yours first." She looked at him a moment longer. "I'm Amelia." "I know," he said. "I'm Marcus." "I know," she said. "Then, did you bring anything to do? Because this park has a really good climbing structure, but it's more fun if there are more people to race." He blinked once. No, I didn't bring anything." "That's okay, I'll teach you. I'm faster than in a look." She started toward the climbing structure without waiting for further agreement, her yellow jacket bright against the January gray. Marcus looked at Veronica. Veronica looked at him. "She's not afraid of anything," he said quietly. "She learned it," Veronica said. "It didn't come easy, but she learned it." He held her gaze. "She learned it from you." She didn't deny it. "Go," she said, "before she laps you on the climbing structure and you never hear the end of it." He went. She watched him go, watched him walk toward their daughter, watched Amelia immediately begin explaining the rules of a race she was already going to win, watched Marcus listen with the focused attention of a man who understood at a level deeper than logic that this was the only appointment that had ever actually mattered. Veronica sat on the bench. She put her hands in her lap. She breathed. The work ahead was real. The legal arrangements still had to be made. The conversation still had to be had with Amelia between her and Marcus. The long and difficult work of building something functional out of a history that had been built wrong from the start. There was Claire and Daniel in the question of what those children would eventually mean to each other. There was Helena and the damage of that particular truth and whether it ever fully healed. There was her own grief still present for the years she had spent carrying something alone that had always been too heavy for one person. None of it was resolved. None of it was clean. But her daughter was climbing a structure in a yellow jacket, already winning a race she had invented 30 seconds ago, and the man at the bottom of the structure was watching her with an expression that contained underneath everything complicated and unfinished, something simple and irreducible. He saw her. Finally. Completely. He saw her. And Veronica, sitting on that bench in the January cold, looked at the family that had been broken before it was ever assembled and thought, this is where it starts. Not where it ends, not where it's fixed or whole or easy, but where it starts with honesty and accountability in a 6-year-old in a yellow jacket who had decided with characteristic efficiency to move forward. Amelia reached the top of the structure, looked back down at Marcus and announced, I win. You get a second chance, though, because it's your first time. That's generous of you, Marcus said. I know, said Amelia. I'm a generous person. Also faster. Come on. She had gotten that from Veronica, too, the particular grace of letting people begin again without making them beg for it. It was Veronica had always thought the hardest kind of strength, and it was the one she was most proud of passing on. She watched them and breathed and let the cold morning hold her. And for the first time in 6 years, she did not press her hand against her chest to protect something fragile from a world trying to reach it. She let her hands rest open in her lap. She let herself be seen. And that quietly, without ceremony, in a park in January, with the lake somewhere in the distance and her daughter's voice carrying clean and clear through the cold air, was how it ended and how it began and how it became finally theirs.